NFL players are clowning Jayden Daniels after his team sent LSU a cease and desist letter over his old jersey number. Former players are calling him out, with one even saying he's nowhere near Joe Burrow's level. But Daniels isn't sitting quietly, he's fighting back. Let's get into it. Jayden Daniels spent Wednesday night and Thursday morning watching his name get dragged across every corner of football media, and it wasn't for anything that happened on a field. An attorney representing the Washington Commanders quarterback had sent LSU a letter informing the school that it can no longer use his name, image, and likeness. According to an org, 5 letters sent to Tigers athletic director Verge Ausberry. Within hours, current and former players were piling on. The loudest voice came from someone who actually wore the same jersey in the same building. Braden Fehoko, a former LSU nose tackle who went on to play in the NFL and who played on the Tigers' 2019 national championship team, said in a post, "I say this in no form of disrespect to JD as a fellow Tiger. You not on the same level as Joey B," referring to former LSU quarterback Joe Burrow. He didn't stop there. Fehoko went further, warning that Daniels was letting the people around him damage his own legacy at LSU, all over a jersey number that was never retired or even discussed for retirement. When in college football, numbers get passed down from one great player to the next as a form of respect. That comparison to Burrow became the entire framework for the pile-on. Burrow won a Heisman at LSU back in 2019, and he did it while leading LSU to a historic 15-0 season and a national title against Clemson, in what many consider one of the best seasons in college football history. Fans and former players kept bringing up the fact that his number was treated the same way Daniels wanted his to be treated, without anyone ever putting it in writing. Burrow's number isn't formally retired, but no LSU player has worn number 9 since he left the team. Nobody needed a cease and desist letter to make that happen. It just happened. Not every former Tiger jumped on the pile-on train though. Ryan Clark, a former NFL defensive back who also played at LSU and now works as a commentator, stepped in to push back on the entire comparison. Clark blasted comparisons between Daniels and Burrow, calling them inaccurate and saying, "This is about respecting and honoring a young man who brought the program its 3rd Heisman Trophy and represented LSU with distinction." So right out of the gate, you've got 2 former LSU players, both with actual NFL careers behind them, standing on opposite sides of this thing publicly. Then the analysts got involved. Danny Cannell, a college football analyst, didn't hold back either. He called Daniels' team's decision so weak and said Daniels was getting horrible advice, adding that he looks like an egotistical brat with this move. That's not some random account with 15 followers. That's a guy with a national platform, and he said it under his own name. The clowning didn't stop at commentary. It turned into full-blown internet mockery within hours. One widely shared post joked that Daniels would need a hoodie just to open his phone the next morning, and that he'd be wearing something low-key for future Heisman House commercials. Another post pointed out the irony that people attacking Daniels for the cease and desist were also reminding everyone how weak LSU's defense had actually been during his Heisman season. That nobody at LSU is providing defense for Jayden Daniels, both literally and figuratively. Fans dragged his mother into it too, something that stung given how visible she'd been throughout his career. One post lumped several complaints together, saying between this situation, how he came across on the quarterback docuseries, and whatever was going on with his mum, nobody in the NFL had done more damage to their own image than Daniels, calling him an absolute weirdo. Another commenter went as far as to say he was the softest human being alive, and that Washington should consider cutting him, arguing nobody who threatens legal action over a jersey number has the mental, emotional makeup to be a long-term NFL starter. Even fans who normally side with players against the NCAA machine turned on him here. One post that circulated widely just said, "Screw it, I'll defend LSU over this. Tell that crybaby to kick rocks." Another argued the opposite point, but landed on the same conclusion about Daniels needing to act his part, writing that he was one of the greatest, if not the greatest QB in LSU history, and that he should act like it, while others simply asked whether he needed to be focused on his NFL career instead. So within about 12 hours, Daniels had drawn criticism from a former teammate turned NFL player, a national college football analyst, and a wave of fans who normally would have nothing to do with each other's opinions. That's the setup. Now here's how a jersey number turned into a legal fight in the first place. To understand why grown men who've played in actual NFL locker rooms are dunking on Daniels over a piece of fabric, You have to go back to what number 5 meant at LSU in the first place, and why nobody at the school ever put it in writing that the number was off limits. Daniels didn't start his career at LSU. He transferred in from Arizona State, and by the time he was done, he turned into one of the most productive quarterbacks college football had ever produced. During his final season, he threw for 3,812 yards and 40 touchdowns, while adding 1,134 rushing yards and 10 scores, leading LSU to a 10-3 record and finishing at number 1 in PFN's QB Impact rankings with a 99.4 grade. He capped it off by becoming LSU's 3rd Heisman Trophy winner. He was also the rare kind of dual-threat college football almost never sees. The only player in Division I FBS history to finish with at least 12,000 passing yards and at least 3,000 rushing yards in a career, doing it across 55 games, with 29 of those coming at Arizona State from 2019 to 2021. That number 5 followed him everywhere. He wore it at Arizona State, at LSU, and now with the Commanders. The reigning Heisman Trophy winner made his jersey number official, the same number he wore for 3 seasons at Arizona State and 2 years at LSU. It became part of his identity as a player, which is exactly why what happened next felt personal to him. Here's the thing about jersey retirement in college football though, it almost never happens the way fans assume. LSU has an actual written policy on this. According to the school's own rules, an athlete must have completed competition for 5 years before being nominated for jersey retirement, and must have demonstrated truly unusual and outstanding accomplishments, such as winning a Heisman Trophy or National Player of the Year award, based on the athlete's total LSU career. Daniels left LSU for the draft in early 2024. 5 years from his final season doesn't land until sometime around 2028 or 2029. In other words, the number was never eligible for retirement in the first place, no matter what anyone expected. And LSU has been extremely selective about which numbers actually get pulled from circulation for good. In the program's entire history, there's really only one number treated as permanently untouchable. Legendary halfback Billy Cannon, who wore number 20 while playing at LSU, had his number permanently retired, meaning it cannot be worn again. Everyone else, including Burrow, including Daniels, falls into a different category. Other legendary Tigers have had their jerseys retired while their numbers remain available for current players. That's the technical distinction nobody was talking about in the moment. A jersey can be honored in a display case, while the number itself keeps getting worn. Then came the recruiting piece nobody outside the building knew about until this all blew up. The current wearer of number 5, sophomore cornerback DJ Pickett, wasn't just handed the number on a whim. LSU coach Lane Kiffin told reporters that Pickett had been promised he could wear number 5. When he signed with the Tigers in December 2024, and Pickett had worn that number in high school. Former LSU head coach Brian Kelly, who was actually running the program during Daniels' Heisman season, backed that up publicly, saying he had promised the number to Pickett during the recruiting process, explaining that promising a specific jersey number to a heavily recruited athlete is something that's been standard practice in college athletics for years, used to help entice a player to sign. So you had 2 separate promises sitting on top of each other. LSU's coaching staff believed it had made a fair recruiting pitch to a 5-star cornerback. Daniels believed the program had made an implicit promise to him that his number would be treated as sacred territory the moment he hoisted the Heisman. Neither side put anything on paper that covered both scenarios, and it sat dormant for almost 2 years until preseason camp opened this August, when everyone actually saw it happen in real time. Pickett wore the number 3 jersey during his first season with the Tigers in 2025, but was seen wearing the number 5 jersey at the start of preseason last week. That's the moment the fuse got lit. For an entire year, nobody had worn Daniels' old number, and it felt to his camp like an unofficial retirement. Daniels' jersey was not retired by the Tigers, but it is the first time the number has been worn on the team since he joined the NFL. The second it showed back up on someone else's back at practice, phones started buzzing, camera crews at camp zoomed in, and within days lawyers were involved. What makes this whole thing sting even more for Daniels' side is the Burrow comparison that kept getting thrown back at him. Burrow's number 9 has enjoyed the exact same unofficial treatment Daniels wanted. Nobody's worn it since he left, but Burrow never had to threaten anybody to make that happen. It just organically stayed off the depth chart out of respect, out of superstition, Or maybe just because nobody at LSU wanted the number that badly. Daniels' side seems to believe he deserved that same organic treatment, and when it didn't happen the same way, they went legal instead of letting it play out. Which brings us to the other side of this fight, the 18-year-old kid who's actually wearing the number right now, and what he's had to say about all of it. While Daniels was getting roasted online, the actual center of this entire dispute was standing at a podium in Baton Rouge, calmly explaining that he'd worn this number his entire life and had no plans to give it back. DJ Pickett isn't some random walk-on who stumbled into a beef with a Heisman winner. He came to LSU as a highly regarded prospect, and the number mattered to him personally long before Daniels ever set foot on campus wearing it. When reporters pressed him on the situation, Pickett kept his response measured, saying he wore the number his whole life since he was 4 years old, and that it was the number he was promised, adding that he wished Daniels the best, calling him a good player who was real good at LSU. That's not a kid trying to pick a fight. That's a kid who's been asked the same question 100 times this week, and is trying to stay out of a mess that isn't really his. His first season on campus, Pickett had to wait his turn anyway, wearing a different number entirely. Pickett wore number 3 during his first season with the Tigers in 2025, when he was named a freshman All-American. And it wasn't a token freshman campaign either. The guy actually produced. He led LSU with 3 interceptions to go with 37 tackles, and 1 sack in 524 defensive snaps. This is a starting caliber cornerback, not a practice squad afterthought, getting handed a number just to stir up drama. His father got pulled into the story too, forced to respond publicly to a situation involving his son, and a player his son had never even shared a locker room with. That alone tells you how far this thing spread beyond the 2 parties who actually had a claim to the number. A teenager's dad doing interviews about a jersey dispute involving an NFL starting quarterback 3 states away. Then there's the coaching side of this, and Lane Kiffin's role deserves its own attention here, because he's the one who actually had to answer for the decision in real time, standing in front of reporters at camp while cameras zoomed in on Pickett's new jersey. Kiffin didn't dodge it. He confirmed directly to the media that the number situation had been settled with Pickett long before Daniels' side ever sent a letter. That promise, according to Kiffin, dated back to December 2024, which is over a year and a half before anyone from Daniels' camp raised an objection. That timeline matters more than almost anything else in this story. If Daniels' team had objected the moment Pickett signed his letter of intent, this becomes a completely different conversation. Maybe even one LSU could have walked back before commitments were finalized. Instead, the objection didn't surface until the jersey physically showed up on a practice field a year and a half later, at which point Pickett had already built an entire freshman season around wearing a different number while waiting for his promised one. Former head coach Brian Kelly's comments added another layer of complexity, because he wasn't just confirming a policy, he was confirming his own personal involvement in making the promise, while Daniels was still on the roster, or at least freshly gone from it. Former LSU coach Brian Kelly told ESPN that he believed the number was pro, a promise Kelly stood behind publicly, putting his own name behind the decision that ultimately sparked the entire legal fight. When the coach who actually coached the Heisman-winning season is the same coach validating the decision to hand the number to someone else, that undercuts the idea that LSU blindsided Daniels out of nowhere. The people running the program at the time knew exactly what they were promising, and to whom. None of this stopped the internet from turning Pickett into a punchline in the crossfire. Even though he'd said almost nothing provocative, fans who sided with Daniels argued the freshman should have picked a different number out of respect. Fans who sided with LSU argued Pickett had every right to a number he'd worn since childhood, especially one that was never formally retired in the first place. One fan pushed back hard on the entire premise of Daniels even having a legacy worth protecting, cracking that Daniels' best performances were losing 2 games to Florida State. A jab that ignored the Heisman season entirely, but captured how ugly the tone had gotten by that point. Through all of it, Pickett kept showing up to practice in the number, because as far as he and his coaching staff were concerned, there was nothing left to negotiate. The promise was made in 2024. He held up his end by committing to the program, and now it was on the field, being defended not through legal threats, but simply by him putting the pads on and going back to work. That contrast, a teenager quietly doing his job while a franchise quarterback's legal team fired off cease and desist letters, is a big part of why this story took off the way it did. It's also exactly why the next phase of this got so much messier, because the legal letter itself went a lot further than most people realized when the story first broke. Once the actual cease and desist letter leaked, the story stopped being about a jersey number and turned into something closer to a contract dispute, one with real legal teeth behind it. The letter came from Daniels' attorney, and it didn't read like a strongly worded email. It read like something meant to end up in a courtroom. In the cease and desist letter sent to Osbury, attorney Adam Kenner noted that Daniels' contract with LSU permitted the school to use his name, image, and likeness for 180 days beyond his final game in college. That window had closed a long time ago. Kenner's letter made the position blunt, writing that LSU must immediately cease and desist from any further issue, use, display, publication, distribution, promotion, commercialization, or other exploitation of Mr. Daniels' NIL in any manner or medium. He then raised the stakes even higher, warning that any use of Mr. Daniels' NIL occurring after LSU's receipt of this notice will be deemed knowing and willful and will be pursued vigorously through all available legal and equitable remedies without further notice. That's not a request, that's a threat with a filing date attached to it. But here's where the story got genuinely confusing for a lot of people following along, including some in the media. The cease and desist letter, strictly speaking, had nothing to do with the jersey number itself. NFL insider Mike Garafolo made that distinction clear after actually reading the document, pointing out that there's nothing in the letter about LSU using the number 5 jersey, and that there's no legal claim to the number itself. Legally, Daniels can't stop Pickett from wearing a number. What he can apparently try to stop is LSU continuing to use his name, image, and likeness in any promotional capacity going forward, which, given how much college programs lean on former stars for recruiting videos, social content, and Heisman House-style advertising, is still a significant hit to how the school operates. That distinction is exactly why the fallout kept expanding beyond just a jersey. If it were only about the number, this ends in a week with an apology or a quiet compromise. Instead, reports started surfacing that Daniels' camp wanted something even bigger back from the school. According to sourcing from radio personality Matt Moscona, sources indicated that Daniels' camp wants LSU to return its copy of the Heisman Trophy. Not the actual trophy, schools keep replicas, but the symbolic gesture of pulling LSU's copy entirely, as if severing the relationship down to the physical artifact sitting in a trophy case in Baton Rouge. That's the moment this thing stopped being a labor dispute over a jersey, and turned into something that looked, to a lot of observers, like an attempt to erase the relationship altogether. And that's exactly the piece that made even sympathetic voices start to wince. Fans who defended Daniels on the jersey question suddenly found themselves unable to defend a full institutional break with the school that helped build his Heisman campaign in the first place. Daniels, for his part, tried to lower the temperature the moment the letter went public, posting directly to his own account rather than letting his representatives control the entire message. He wrote that he had a lot of gratitude for his time at LSU and was proud of what my teammates and I accomplished there, adding, "Obviously there are issues to be worked out between my team and LSU, and my hope is that it will get done privately." He reinforced that his attention was elsewhere entirely, saying, "My sole personal focus is on Commanders football. I realize the business of football is unique, and I trust this can all be resolved." That statement did two things at once. It signaled Daniels wanted this handled away from cameras, which is a reasonable position for anyone heading into a season. But it also, intentionally or not, drew a sharper line between Jayden Daniels the person and Jayden Daniels' team, implying the legal aggression might be coming from representatives and family, rather than from him sitting down and deciding to sue his own alma mater. Fans picked up on that gap immediately, with some openly wondering, did Jayden Daniels do this, or was it his mum? Whether that's fair to Daniels or not, it's clearly part of why NFL veterans got involved in the pile-on the way they did. Nobody criticizing him publicly seemed convinced this was purely a business decision made by a legal team without his direct sign-off. The statement from his own spokesperson used language that read like it came straight from the family, describing them as deeply disappointed and feeling profoundly disrespected by LSU's decision to give Jayden's number to another player. That kind of emotional framing, paired with an attorney's letter threatening vigorous legal pursuit, made it look less like a business dispute and more like a family conflict that had escalated into legal terminology. Meanwhile, LSU itself has stayed almost entirely silent through all of this publicly. The athletic department declined comment when reporters reached out for reaction, leaving Kiffin's remarks at the podium and Kelly's comments to ESPN as the only real institutional response the public has gotten. That silence has its own effect. It leaves Daniels' camp's version of events as the loudest voice in the room, even while the internet piles on him for the tone of that version. So by the time training camp reached midweek, you had a Heisman quarterback threatening legal action against the school. That helped make him a household name. A freshman cornerback quietly wearing the number he was promised since childhood. Two former LSU players publicly disagreeing about whether the anger was justified, and a national analyst calling the entire situation weak and egotistical. That's a lot of noise for a jersey number that was never even officially retired. Here's where the story stands. Heading into the season, nobody actually wanted this drama attached to. Daniels is set to open preseason play almost immediately, with the Commanders kicking things off against the Dolphins, before turning to a real slate that begins with a matchup against the Eagles. Daniels and the Commanders begin the preseason with a matchup against the Miami Dolphins, before starting the regular season against the Philadelphia Eagles on Sept 13. That timing is part of why so many analysts, even ones sympathetic to his frustration over the number, questioned whether this was the week to be fighting a legal battle with a university. Instead of locking in on install periods and joint practices, even the NBC sports analysis that walked through the entire mess concluded flatly that the letter was sent during training camp, when his full focus should have been on preparing for the kind of season that would eventually get his own number retired in Washington instead. There's something almost circular about that point. Daniels wants LSU to treat his college number the way retired numbers get treated, while simultaneously being in the exact position, a young star still building his legacy, where his current team hasn't had the chance to consider retiring anything yet either. The entire situation underscores how complicated jersey retirement really is in general, because eventually someone else is always going to want that number, and it's usually the guy it was retired for who has to decide whether to hand it over gracefully. LSU never got that chance to ask Daniels directly, the way plenty of programs quietly do with alumni before handing a number to a new face. Whether that omission was an oversight or a genuine institutional slight is still the one thing nobody outside LSU's building can answer with certainty. Pickett, for what it's worth, doesn't appear to be going anywhere. He's entering his sophomore season as one of the more heavily counted on pieces of LSU's secondary, coming off a freshman year that already earned him All-American recognition. There's been no indication from Kiffin, from the athletic department, or from Pickett himself that the jersey is in play as a bargaining chip. If anything, the cornerback's calm, almost deferential public comments have made it harder for anyone to paint him as the villain in this, no matter how loud the criticism of Daniels gets. As for the letter itself, its practical effect remains narrower than the headlines made it sound. LSU can still let Pickett wear the number since there's nothing in the letter addressing jersey usage and no legal claim tied to the number itself. What LSU reportedly can't do anymore, at least according to Daniels' legal team, is keep using his likeness in marketing, in throwback content, in recruiting materials, or in anything tied to promotion of the program going forward. That's a real cost for a school that has leaned heavily on recent Heisman winners as a recruiting tool, especially with Burrow's own legacy already serving that exact function for years. What happens next probably depends on whether LSU and Daniels' camp find a way to resolve this the way Daniels himself said he hoped they would, privately, away from cameras, without either side needing to escalate further. Given how much noise this has already generated, and given that even former teammates are split on whether Daniels is in the right, a quiet resolution might be the only outcome that actually cools this down. But for now, the number 5 sits on 2 different rosters at once, one on a rookie cornerback's back in Baton Rouge, and one retired in spirit, if not in writing, 3 states away in a Commander's quarterback's mind. Whether LSU ever bridges that gap the way Daniels wants them to, remains the one thing this entire fight still hasn't settled.